Hi, my name is Will Harvey, also known as Revelo. I'm a 3D digital artist and motion designer that creates visual loops and content for musicians and artists. Here's my demo reel. I've created content and VJ loops for many musicians and artists, including but not limited to Lil Nas X, Lil Uzi Vert, DJ Diesel, aka Shaq or Shaquille O'Neal, and the City Girls. I create content for their performances or for their festivals, and today I'll be showing how to create a VJ loop from scratch using Cinema 4D and doing post work in After Effects. So let's take a look at the scene that we're going to be making today. So if we take a look at the scene that we're going to be making today, it's pretty simple. It's not anything too crazy. We're going to be using a majority of the things that are in Cinema 4D. So if we take a look, we have a few spheres being cloned onto a sweep NURB. We have a few tubes, as well as some spline to spline wraps. So we're going to be doing a little bit of a sketch and tune look today, just something that can be visually interesting as well as being not too hard, something that's easy to get into. So if we play this through, we can tell that there's a few things changing. We have some changing of the spheres. We have a few different particles into the scene. There's a lot going on. Just something visually that can change the way you look at it, but also loop as well. So if we go to the beginning of the timeline, you can tell that this is the beginning. So if we go and skip to the end, nothing has happened. And that's what you want. When you're looping, you want to be able to have the beginning and the end be exactly the same so that it can have that continuous loop. Now you can do different ways of looping. You can do some cuts, you can do some things like that, but this is the simplest way to be able to create something like that. So if we play it through, it seamlessly loops. And what's great is we have different things changing. These spheres grow. If you look pretty close, you can tell that they grow and shrink over time, just to add some dynamics throughout the scene. So let's jump into a new project. I'll show you how we get to this final product right here, and then we'll go into After Effects after to do some post work, some color correction, some basic things, and then you'll have yourself a VJ loop in no time. So we have a new scene here. We have just a blank canvas, something for us to work on. For the render settings, I just have the basic. I didn't change anything. I didn't do anything crazy to it. If you want to, you can make this 1920 by 1080 basic high definition resolution. So you can do that. I will probably keep it at 1280 by 720 just to keep things moving quickly. So right now we don't have anything in the scene. We need to be able to build a tunnel. We need something in the scene for our camera to go down. We need to be able to go through this tunnel. So let's build the tunnel. So there are different ways that you can do that. You can either set up a cylinder and have it go along the spline using a spline wrap. That's one way of doing it, but I'll be doing it by using sweep NURBs, or what is now just called sweep. So I'll start off by taking the spline pin, and creating a spline. Super simple, nothing crazy. super easy looking path. You can tell there's nothing too crazy about it. So, but here's the thing: if you notice, it's pretty jagged. What you want out of the spline is for it to be a lot smoother. When this camera is being animated along the spline, you don't want to have a lot of jagged edges on your spline path, because then it'll disorient, it'll look awkward, and it just will not work out. So instead of using the Bezier type in the object properties for the spline, we're going to change it to cubic. This will smooth everything out and make a lot of the edges not so hard. But the issue now that we're coming into is that there's a lot of just crazy turns. If you imagine that these VJ loops are going to be put on screens or on billboards or wherever this is going to be, you don't want to have a lot of crazy edges or turns, because that can disorient the viewer, that can disorient the person that is watching this, and you don't want that. This is to add to the performance, not so much disorient them and make them dizzy. So let's change this a little bit. Let's move some of these points around, make them not so aggressive around these turns. We're trying to make this smooth. This isn't Fast and the Furious. We're not trying to drift around these things. So let's move a few of these spline points. I think that looks fine. I think that's okay. I enjoy that path. So great. You can also move these up and down in the space as well to create a few hills, create a few more interesting movements throughout the scene. I'm just going to keep it like this, keep it very simple, and we'll just go from here. So one thing I like to do is I like to be able to do this somewhat to scale, since this is going to be very abstract and not so much realistic. We're not going for like a sci-fi look or anything like that, but I still want to be able to not have to make so many scaling edits. I don't want to have to keep scaling things up and down. So what I'll do is I'll scale this spline path a lot. I'll scale it up. I'll make it a lot bigger. And so I put the figure in there to try to figure out what that's going to look like. And I think it looks fine. I think it's okay. I think we'll go with that, and you should be good. So as you can tell, I put in a sweep already. I went ahead of the steps, but it's fine. So with this sweep, you're able to create the tunnel. Within the sweep, you're able to add in the spline as well as the shape of the tunnel as well. So if we throw in this circle spline that we grabbed from up here and put it into the sweep, we have ourselves a tunnel. Pretty simple, pretty easy. It's very powerful, a very powerful tool. So if we go into here, we can check and make sure that it looks the way we need it. Not too crazy. It's a tunnel. It's pretty much it, So you got yourself a VJ loop now. No, but if we go in and check it out, we've got something ready to be messed around with. We can add some character to it, give it a little something. I'm going to turn off the work plane so that we can go in here and not have to worry about that clouding up the old view space. So if we look through here, we have ourselves the tunnel, and I think I want to add some elements in here that can make it look a little bit, a little bit better. It's just a tunnel for now, but I think we can add some elements to make it look interesting. Let's add a tube. Let's see what this tube can do. So if we look at the tube, zoom out a little bit more. Now, my idea or my thought is I want to be able to clone this tube in a certain way along the spline. So let's take our cloner. This just clones whatever you put as a child under it. So if we drag it to the cloner, it clones within a grid. But the thing is, we don't want it as a grid. You don't want to have it as a grid. It's not going to go along the spline path. So instead, we need to change this to object. So when we change this to object, nothing is going to happen because we have to assign what object this is going on to. Now, if we were to put the sweep in there, it's just going to clone it onto the sweep, and we might do that along the way, but for now we want this onto the spline path. So instead of actually using the object, you can also use the spline path as something you want to clone onto. So if we drag the spline here into the object slot, nothing happened. It didn't see anything because this is scaled down. So I mean, if we turn the sweep off, we got it. The tube is on to the spline path. That's a good thing. The problem is now the orientation is not correct. So as you can tell, it'd be kind of weird if we're going down this VJ loop path and we just keep running into tubes along the way. So it's not really what we're wanting. It's not the thing that we're wanting. So let's change that to get it to look the way we want it to and actually look like we're going through these tubes. We need to change the orientation. So let's figure out which one works best for us. And it looks like +Z is what we're wanting. Now, throughout this entire process, I'm going to be changing segments and different details within the object properties. This is all just by look and what you're feeling. I highly recommend stray off during this and just find what works best for you. If you want to make this just a tube in the middle of this tunnel, you do your thing. Go for it. I would love to see that. For me, though, I just want the tube to encase the outer part of the tunnel. So just enough to cover that outer part. And we can lower the height here of the tube. And then I don't think the segments are up enough, so let's do the rotation segments. If we turn on ground shading lines, we can tell what the segments look like. So right now we have segments that we don't need. I mean, the height segments need to be brought down, so let's bring those down. I think the rotation segments look okay, so if we change that back, I'll show you. This is what it looked like before. Let's multiply by 2. Now we have double the amount of segments. I think that looks good. I'm kind of liking that. Now, it's not too crazy right now. We haven't added any of the craziness that is of like the look or what we're wanting to go for, but we're getting somewhere. So I've added the tube in. I think I can probably raise this up a little bit more, add a few more into there. If we look at here, we can tell that it's the distribution of the tubes are not even. They're either clumped at certain corners or they're just not where we want them to be. So to change that, we can click on the cloner, go to the distribution, and instead of using count, we can go to even, and this will evenly distribute them along the spline. So now that we have that, when we go through this tunnel, it'll evenly be distributed along the path of the tunnel. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go and add some more elements to this. I'm feeling like I want to add some spheres into here. So we could just take some primitives. We could take a sphere. We can change the type to icosahedron. This just makes it into tris instead of quads. It just gives a more even distribution of polygons around the object. I like to turn off render perfect, and I'll show y'all why when we get to the texturing and rendering side of things. I always turn this off. So let's add the spheres into the scene. Now I'm thinking what would be cool is if the spheres were coating the inside of this tunnel, like it's like a bulbous, just morphing thing. So let's add another cloner in. This cloner is so powerful, you're able to do a lot with it. It's insane what the possibilities are for the actual cloner in Cinema 4D. So let's change it to object like we had it before. Instead of grid, let's do object. And instead of putting it on the spline path, let's actually put it on the sweep. It's cloning it on the inside of the sweep, which is really cool. So what we can do is turn up the count, gives us a lot more spheres to work with. Let's take it to like 500. I mean, let's do 750 because I'll show you all a tip right here to get a variation of different spheres within the scene. What I also like to do is I also like to vary the spheres within the cloner as well. I like to be able to put different sizes in here. So if we do like one is at 50, one is at 35, one is at, let's say 25, and then we can go 12.5. Let's just say that. So now we have a random assortment of sizes and just a lot of different spheres that make it a lot more varied. But I still think we can take it a little bit further. So instead of just doing that as well, we can just go into the MoGraph tab up here, go to the effectors, and while still selecting the cloner, click on random. And what this will do is it'll randomly shift them at first, which is because the position is being checked off and the values of the positions are being put into the cloner. Instead of doing that, let's do scale. So if we take the scale to a value of -1, this will shrink them all at random values to basically nothing. So from 1 to nothing. So now we have a random assortment of even smaller spheres, even bigger spheres. I mean, it's all at random now. So if we take a look outside, we have nothing, but if we go into the tunnel, we can zoom in. Voila, we got ourselves some pretty cool looking VJ loop going on right here. It's still not done, but we got something. So I'm kind of liking this. I want to add a little bit more variety into it. So I think now what I would like to do is change the way the whole of the tunnel looks. So what we could do is duplicate our sweep. I just held Control or Command on the keyboard, drag left mouse button click and drag, and then we got ourselves basically a duplicate of what we just had right there for the sweep. But instead of just having this regular sweep, what I can do is poly reduce this. Now what this will do is it'll reduce the polys within the sweep to create this sort of low poly look, tri look within the sweep. So we can also try to lower that as well by lowering the number of subdivisions within the sweep. So if we go to our original circle spline path and lower this to something like half or 2, and then turn this back on, you can tell from the original to now we have ourselves a deformed looking tunnel. But I like the original hole, the original tunnel hole of it all. So let's try to figure out a way to mesh both of these together. The thing that I really like about this look really isn't the actual shape, more so just the lines. I think I like the lines of this more. So what I can do to actually show that is go to the atom array, and if I hold Alt down and release, it then everything below that was selected becomes a child of the atom array. So we have that, our tunnel hole is gone. So we turn that back on, boom, we got ourselves that edged look from the hole. One thing I probably want to do too is raise up the reduction strength so that we get more just jagged looking, craziness in here. Let's do like 97.5 for the reduction strength. And that gives us a little something, you know, something pretty cool within there. Whoops. There we go. So if we turn on our tube and our spheres again, now we got ourselves something in the scene that looks pretty interesting. Got this coming across, and as you fly through the scene with the camera, you want to have a lot of like detail going throughout this scene. It creates a lot of interesting movements, a lot of interesting paths, and it just makes the video interesting, basically. So I think I like this. This looks pretty cool. And what we could also do, we could also go in and add some more details to the outside of this. There are different ways that you can do that. Whatever you feel like you want to do, go do it. Nothing is ever wrong with this. You can, if you don't like something, there's always Control-Z, undo. So always remember that there is a Control-Z. So let's add this sphere into here. What I'm thinking is I want to have spirals going on along the hull of the tunnel. So as we're going through, you see just this angular spiraling going down the tunnel. One way that I think about doing that, is actually just spline wrapping it to the actual spline path. So I'll show you how to do that right now. So we have a cloner. The cylinder that I threw into the scene is in the cloner. We change this to grid to, actually, instead of object, we would go radial and change the plane to something like this. So it looks like we're going down it. Looks like a radial mode. So yeah, I don't know if I want it to be completely circular. So what I'll do is I'll go into the cylinder, and instead of the rotation segments being 16, let's do like 4. I think 4 looks fine. Yeah, I kind of enjoy it. That looks cool. And to get the spline wrap to work, we have to create a null. We have to put the null, or we have to put the cloner in the null. So a hotkey for putting any object that's selected into a null is Alt-G, Option or Alt-G. I'll do that again. Alt-G, and it'll put it into a null. If we open the null, we have the cloner with the cylinder, and we have all this going on. Nothing's happening because we need to put the spline wrap effector into the null. Now, this can be used by putting it into the cylinder, or as a child of the cylinder, and you can tell it's already done something. It'll put a bounding box around the cylinder so that when you throw a spline into the spline option, it will wrap that cylinder around the spline. It'll take it down that path. But we don't want that. We don't want just that cylinder. We want the entire cloner. So instead, the reason we put this into a null is because whatever the spline wrap is a child of, within that group, it'll take all the objects within that null, within that group, and put a bounding box around it. So if we take another spline wrap, put it within the null, it's all around the cloned objects in that scene, which is crazy. It's awesome. When I figured this out, this was like game changer. This is a game changer. It was insane. So we have this. I think right now it's going along the right axis, which is great. You want that arrow to be along whichever way the cylinder is going down. So right now it's going down the X axis. So we want to make sure that that's on the X. X or minus works either way. It's fine for this. I mean, if you want it to look a certain way, like let's say one side is different than the other, then you can do that by flipping them. You can just change the axis from plus to minus, it works, you know. So in the spline wrap, we're going to take our original spline and drag that into the spline option. And you can see it's already done something. Now it's not doing what I want it to. Right now it is taking the cylinders that are within the cloner and trying to wrap them around the spline. The issue though is that there's not enough segments within the cylinder, so we need to up the segments. Not the rotation segments, but the height segments. And as we move this up, now it's starting to do what I'm wanting it to do. There we go. Let's change it to 36, keep it all even. And if we go into the tunnel, you can tell it's already doing it. It's wrapping it around that spline. But the issue is I don't want it to be so close up. I want it to be along the whole of the tunnel. So what we can do is just raise the radius of the radial up. You can raise the radius up and it will change and go along the whole of the tunnel. I kind of like that. The issue is it's super just straightforward. Let's give it a little bit of character. So if we go into the spline wrap, we are given a lot of options, including size, the spline size, rotation, as well as the bounding box that can be changed. Now, right now I want it to kind of spiral down this tunnel. So one way to do that is just go into the rotation, find the rotation in the spline wrap, and just move this up until it reaches the top. And as you can see in the viewport, it starts to spin. Now what it's doing is this is the start and this is the end of the spline. So if we move this up, it's rotating the start of the spline how many times you want it to do that. So 360, half is 180, you know, it can go from there. I want it to completely spin around so that when we start at the beginning of the spline, it all interconnects and looks correct. So let's zoom out a little bit. And I think that's good, but I don't know. I kind of want to add some particles, but I don't want it to just be another circle. I think what would be cool is if we add some cool geometric designs, things like that within it. Now I'm not going to go super crazy. You can add in whatever you want, whether it be a plane, cube. You can add anything in there. If you have an object of Pikachu or something and you want to throw it in there as that, do your thing. Go ahead. Anything is possible within the world of Cinema 4D. So what we'll actually do for this demonstration is we're going to take a disc. Now the disc looks just plain, it's a plain disc, but what we can do is there's these notches, these little things right here that change the size of the actual disc. But there's also one right in the middle, right at the origin, that if we were to move this is the inner radius of the disc. So if we change this, we can change the size of that inner radius, which is great. Now we can get some different varieties of rings throughout this. That'd be pretty cool. So let's duplicate it, scale it down. Can probably change the inner radius a little bit more. I think that looks cool. So we have two of these. These are all going to be different sizes, variations throughout the thing. So if we add a cloner, throw both of these as a child of the cloner, it will clone it. That looks pretty cool right there too, but that's not what we're going for today. If we change the mode to object, and then the object we want to make the spline, actually no, let's not do the spline. Let's do the sweep. Let's do the actual sweep. And instead of surface, let's choose volume. What this will do is instead of cloning on the surface of the sweep, it will clone in the volume of that object. So whatever object you choose, I'll show you right here. it'll clone within the volume of it and not so much on the surface of the actual object, which is pretty cool. You can get some crazy looking things out of this. Let's change the orientation to something like, let's do Z. That way we can see a bunch of these. There's not many in the scene, so let's up the count. We're getting a lot more. Let's do like 150. And what we can do is we can duplicate this random effector. Let's move it up. Click on the cloner, go to effectors, and add that random to the effector of that cloner. And so we just get the same variation that we did with the spheres, just with these disk particles. As I'm noticing right now, the size of the disks are pretty big, so let's just scale it down. If we click on the cloner, it'll just scale everything under it with that cloner. So let's scale it down. That looks pretty cool. I'm fine with that. So we have that. Now we have some particles in the scene. I think there's some changes I want to make to it, but let's actually go ahead and get the camera in the scene, and I'll show you what changes I want to make to that later. So right now we have this. Let's start adding our camera in. So we have a camera. If you go up here, there's camera, target camera, stereo camera, motion camera, and a camera crane, as well as a camera morph. We just want the regular camera. So right now the camera is set up from the last position we chose when we clicked on the camera, when in reality we don't want that position. We actually want to have that camera go along the spline that has been created, the path that we created. So what we'll do is we'll right click on the camera, go to animation tags, and right under animation tags there's align to spline. What this will do is it'll tell the camera, hey, go along the path of the spline, and depending on the position I choose will be the position of the path that you're moving along. So let's move the camera down here. Let's stay organized. So we have all of our objects here, everything that we've created here. We have our camera. Let's go to our tag, and under the sweep, let's choose that spline, and I'll show you what it does. It moved the camera, but it moved it to the start position of the spline. Now, if you can tell right here, and if we go into the camera, if we click on this little thing right here, we're just facing the wall. But we don't want to face the wall because that wouldn't be as interesting. So I think let's go ahead and get this camera like centered up and looking like it's going down this tunnel. So what we can do is click on the align to spline tag, click on tangential, and this will align it to whatever axis that is that's been chosen. Now this will go straight down the path that we created, and if we move the position, voila, got ourselves a camera going down this tunnel. It's crazy, looks wild. It's a little sickening because we're just moving along pretty fast. So what we'll do is we'll actually change a few things within this to make it look better. So right now what I'm already noticing is the camera focal length is a little off. So I don't like to do anything that's like telephoto or super telephoto. Nor portrait or normal lens. Let's do like a wide angle lens. This can give us enough room in the scene to be able to like look at what's going on. So I kind of do that with a lot of my VJ loops in general. If you look at any of the VJ loops that I give out for free on my website, those will be majority of the time just wide angle lenses. So if we go in and look at what we have the camera, align to spline, and it looks kind of boring. Right now what I'm noticing is I'm not liking this atom array. It's too thick. I'm not a fan of it. So what we can do is we can click on the atom array. We can scale it down, let's say something like 3.5 for the spheres. And for the cylinders, for these big cylinders, we could just change this to like 1.75. Actually, let's go down more, 1.25. And in all honesty, we're not seeing all these subdivisions all the time, so we don't need it to be at 8. Let's try like 3. I think 3 will be perfectly fine for what we're doing. Now, we still have these particles in the air. The issue, though, is that they're just facing one way. When in reality, I want them to face the camera at all times. So what we can do is we can click on the cloner, go up to our MoGraph effectors, and there's an effector called target. Now, this is kind of like the target tag within the animation tags. What that does is it says this object that the tag has always is going to be facing whatever object is selected, or whatever object that is being put into the actual tag. So if we go to the target object down here, that is the object that we want it to face. So we added the target effector. Let's make sure that the effectors are added in there. And if we go to the target effector and choose the camera, these objects that are being cloned will always face that camera at all times, which is what we want. That's perfect. I'm still not completely there with it. I kind of want it to, I don't want it to populate the scene. I just want it to show up whenever the camera gets close to these particles. So what we can do is, let's change the seed a little bit, try to get something that looks, there we go. Now we can see it's all the way down this tunnel, but I don't really want that. I kind of want it to vary. I want it to look a little bit different as it moves down the tunnel. So what we can do is go to MoGraph, Effector, go to the plane, already added, the plane is already added. And what this will do is it basically just says, all these clones, change the position or change the rotation or change the scale. Super simple, nothing too crazy. What we want to do though is we want to change the scale. So if we go in and change the scale to -1, nothing. There's nothing going to be there, which is exactly what I'm wanting, sort of. What I want it to do is I want it to actually only show up when it's near the camera. So here's the way I do that. For any of my dust, for any of my particles, this is exactly how I do it, and it makes it a lot easier in the long run. So if we take the plane and we throw it within the camera, we can change the transformation of this. You can go into the coordinates and change it, or you can just hit the reset transformation button. You can also do Alt-0 or Control-0, and that's the hotkey for it. But I've set it up right here so I could just click it. And it's reset its position, rotation, and scale to the camera. So now we have that, but there's no particles. There's nothing there. So what we have to do is we have to tell it, hey, within this radius of this sphere or of this camera, I want the particles to show up. So what we have to do is we have to create a field. If you've never used fields before, I highly recommend it. Amazing. You can do so many things with it, including with vertex maps, and it's just insane. Get out there, find info on it. It's crazy what you can do with fields. So if we click on the spherical field, it'll add it into the plane, and we can look right here and see that it's added this spherical field, but it's not big enough. If we look in the scene, all these particles have showed back up, but that's not what I'm wanting. I want the opposite effect, because what right now it's doing is it's saying anything within that spherical field, it's going to not show up. So as you can see right here with this ring, it's starting to go away once the field touches it. It's not what I want. What I want is I want it to do the opposite. So if we change the minimum and maximum of the field, if we click on the field and change the minimum and maximum of it, we can see now out here, it's starting to scale down. Crazy. It's insane. Okay, so now that we have that, we can scale this up a little bit more, figure out what works best. We can change the inner offset of it and, just go from there. We have what we need right now. So now if we hit render, it's boring, really boring. So let's spruce this up. Let's do a sketch and tune look. So if we go to our material window down here, go to materials, create materials, and down here is a sketch material. The This will create a sketch material. Anything that has to do with the strokes of the sketch and tune, this is where it's being changed. This is where you make the edits. So if we go in here, it's already added sketch and tune to the render settings. It's already added that default visible as the sketch mat down here that we've created. So let's say, let's change some things up. I want to distort the look of it, give it a little bit of jagged edges like its pencil look. I don't think it's that, I mean, if we look at it right now, it's too jagged. It looks not the way I want it to. Not a big fan of that. Let's scale it up a little bit more. So instead of 200, let's do like 500, maybe 750. That could work. Let's render it out again. I like that. It looks cool. I kind of enjoy that. So instead of that thickness, I think we can bring the thickness down a little bit more, but I don't want to do it with this. I actually want to do the scale. No, the noise, the actual noise. So what this will do is at different points throughout the drawing of that line, the noise will change the thickness of it. So let's change it to blistered turbulence. We can add a little bit of contrast, let's say like 7. The scale can go to something like, let's say like 300. That'll be fine. So if we render this out, you can tell that it's not showing up as much, which is exactly what I want. So that scaling worked, like right here. You see it's thicker here, skinnier here. Works perfectly. Really like that. But there's no color. There's not a lot of color in here. There's nothing going on. We have our strokes, but we need color. So where do we get that? Well, we have to make a new material. So if we go down here to our material window, double click on the material window, we'll create a new material. And for this look, you can do different things with sketch and tune. If we go to our texture, click on this little arrow, go to sketch and tune, we can do art, cell, hatch, spots. These are different types of ways to add shading to your objects using sketch and tune. But I'm super basic. I'm not wanting to go for a lot of shadows, nor do I want to do some crazy cell shading or hatching. So what I'll do is I'll actually go to the basic part of the material, turn off the reflections, turn off the color, but leave on that luminance, because that's where all this is going to thrive. So in the luminance, I want to add, go to effects, and go to ambient occlusion. What this will do, if I place this on pretty much everything on here, there we go. It won't look like it's doing anything. It looks too bright. It doesn't look right. But if we hit render, whoa, that's insane. So what it's doing is it's capturing the occlusion shadows that are along the edges of the different objects in the scene. So along these edges, along this edge. So now we don't have just a plain white material on everything with all those lines. So now remember when I added the spheres in, I said I don't want it to be perfect spheres. Well, this is the reason why. So if we go to our spheres and turn back on render perfect, which smooths it out and makes it look like a perfect sphere, this is why I don't want to do that. If we hit render, and any second now, you can see that all these lines are intersecting and can be seen behind everything. It's just, I mean, right here, you're getting a lot of just random lines, and it's because it's rendering out these perfectly and it can't detect those edges as well. It's just smoothing everything out. So if we go into the spheres, we're going to turn that off, and now if we look back at it, it's not only quicker to render out, but you get a better look with the lines. So I think that looks cool. If we go into the sketch and tune, we can change a few of these things. I think intersections would be a cool one to put. I mean, if we look at that on here, you get a few different looks with that. Maybe let's turn it off. We can do overlaps. Let's see what the overlaps look like. Not anything too drastic. It's not changing anything really. I mean, we could try edges. We could do edges. Edges could do pretty well. Yeah, so with the edges, it's just giving us that wireframe look, but with the sketch and tune, which is pretty cool. Has its uses, so. But let's turn it off. I think we're good with that now. I think it's fine right now. So let's actually add back the ambient occlusion tag. If we go to the effects and then ambient occlusion, we can add that back. If we render it out, we can see it's back, and that's cool. Looks cool. I think it looks dope. Now we have the animation part that we need to get to. So we have everything in line. Let's go to our tag. Let's start at 0 at the beginning of the timeline. Hit this little diamond right here, which is the key. This is to give us a keyframe. And let's just skip all the way to the end where 90 is and set this position to 100%. Now we need to hit the keyframe button again, and that will give us a keyframe. Now let's play it back. Wow, that's way too fast. I'm about to throw up. Okay, so what we need to do is, it's a little too fast. We need to really bring the timeline, give it more frames. So let's change that to something like 360, keep it even. We need to change the position of the keyframe to back to 360. So now let's give it another play. We can see that plane effector is working and it's getting a little too fast. So yeah, as you can tell right now, it's easing in and easing out whenever the end of the timeline comes and the end of the loop comes. So I don't think I like that. I kind of want it to be consistent throughout. So what we can do is we can select the keyframes, change it from spline to linear. It'll be constant throughout the entire timeline. So now when we start, we're just going through this. It's pretty simple, pretty easy. Yeah, I mean, it worked. So now that we have the animation going, you can go in and change the color of this. I mean, you can go in and change different settings, different things. So if we want the cloner for the spheres to be a different color, we can. If you make the mix node to multiply, you can change these colors and still have that ambient occlusion affect everything. So, I mean, we have this, we can change the color there, go here and change the color of this cloner. Let's make it like green, and just add a random green. And you can go in and change things and make it look the way you want it to. Now let's go into After Effects and I'll show you what I did in Post Effects. Okay, so now we're in After Effects. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you basically how I take this and do post effects to it. It's not too much, but I wanted to show it and see, you know, just let y'all know what I do with my VJ loop. So what I did was I dragged in that PNG sequence in that folder. I just grabbed the folder, threw it in here, and then created a new After Effects composition by just dragging the sequence over this little icon. So here we go. Got ourselves the old sequence here. So if we press play, nice. We got ourselves something pretty cool. Looking pretty dope. And it should loop right here. Now that's a 12-second loop that will go on for as long as you want it to. One thing I kind of want to do is I want to add some lumetri color. Add that to the adjustment layer. What we could do is we could go to the color wheels and give us some different grading looks. Let's Let's try and, with the shadows, let's do like a little bit more warm tones. Go cooler with the mid-tones, just a little bit. And then for the highs, we can go back to warm just a little bit. I kind of want to give it that like paper, that worn paper look. It's already sketch and tune, so we can add a little bit of that like old grimy paper look. Yeah, it's just by look. It's whatever you feel like works. So if we turn it on and off, you got a little something's going on. I like it. I kind of enjoy it. Now, this might not be the final look. I might find something different. I might think, oh, this could look better and things like that. But that's, over time, you'll figure that out. And with the time you have with the project, you'll figure out what works and what doesn't with what you've created. What I want to do is I want to add grain. So let's add some grain to it. Let's go to final output. I don't want to see that preview. Let's do a preset. Let's just see what works best. So if we go to this, let's do the Kodak. You see it added a little bit of grain. So we turn it off, turn it back on. I enjoy that. I think it looks cool. And yeah, I would probably add some dust layers to this as well, like some film dust layers. But for now, I kind of enjoy this. It's not, I don't want to add too much because I don't want it to be bogged down with just a bunch of just random stuff. But I kind of enjoy this. It gives it a cool look. It's got that playful vibe with that sketch and tune look, and it just gives it a lot of interesting, it's got a lot of interesting shapes within it. So now that's the end of my presentation. I hope to see everyone creating their own VJ loops from what I've presented, and go follow me on Instagram at Revelo Stuff, or on Twitter at Revelo Stuff. Pretty much anywhere it's Revelo. Tag me, let me know what you created. I would love to see what y'all are doing. Post it on YouTube, share it to the world. I would love to see what everybody has created. I want to thank Maxon for allowing me to present and show this project off. It was really fun to be able to create this specifically for the presentation. Thank you so much. Hope y'all have a good one.